Happy Thanksgiving to all, including the radical left lunatics. That was Donald Trump's Thanksgiving post this year. A proclamation riddled with grievance, framing his opponents as enemies. And that is a perfect microcosm of where we are as a nation, divided, angry, and locked into a battle of us versus them. But here's my question. How did we get here? And how do we rise above it, especially when the world seems to be spinning out of control? As someone who has lived and worked at the heart of U.S. politics, I've seen firsthand the chaos and conflict that defined this moment in history. I've also felt the weight of it on my personal life, relationships strained, friends lost to ideological divides. Yet, with experience, I've come to realize one essential truth. I could be wrong. And that simple thought, that seed of humility, has helped me navigate the storm. Frank Bruni, in his book, The Age of Grievance, describes our current state perfectly. Grievance is the enemy of progress. The rioters on January 6th were so certain of their rightness that they left no room in their heads for the possibility of being wrong. Adam Grant penned an editorial for the New York Times. If you're so sure how the next 4 years will play out, I promise you you're wrong. He says, humans may be the only species that can imagine an unknown future, but that doesn't mean we're any good at it. And he writes that psychologist Philip Tetlock found that the average expert was roughly as accurate as a dart-throwing chimpanzee when predicting political or economic outcomes. Even the most skilled forecasters can't anticipate every butterfly effect. Meanwhile, we've become a nation fixated on how we've been wronged. Whether real or imagined, grievances dominate our discourse. Advocacy is no longer about building a better future, it's about assigning blame. And this mindset isn't confined to one side. Oh no. It's bipartisan, pan-partisan, super-partisan. Grievance culture creates an us versus them mentality where compromise is impossible, and opponents are viewed not as rivals, but as existential threats. But what is all this doing to us as individuals, to our communities, to our nation? As Bruni points out, negative partisanship creates an ungovernable society. We no longer vote for candidates we believe in. We vote against the ones we fear. This zero-sum mindset leaves no room for collaboration, no space for common ground, and no humility. On a personal level, this constant state of outrage and opposition erodes our mental health. It pushes us into echo chambers where our biases are amplified and our empathy shrinks. These moments remind us that certainty is an illusion. Even when we feel sure about the future, we're often wrong. This refusal to question our assumptions comes at a cost. Bruni warns that grievance culture fosters division, while Grant points out the danger of overconfidence. He writes that a hunch about the future could feel like a certainty because the present is so overwhelmingly well present. And the consequences? We stop listening, stop growing, and become trapped in cycles of blame and resentment. Adam Grant echoes this. In the worst of times, embracing uncertainty proves liberating. It reminds us how quickly our fortune can change. Pain and loss aren't permanent, Grant writes. Unlike people, plans can be resurrected. Feeling devastated about an election is a cue to figure out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again. Grant captures it well. It's unsettling to realize we have no power to predict the future because it means we aren't in control of our fate. But in the worst of times, that realization can be freeing. It reminds us that pain is temporary and that the future is full of possibility. So how do we break this vicious cycle? Dr. Erna Gödelick suggests we move from the paranoid schizoid position where we see others as either all good or all bad to a depressive position where we recognize complexity and nuance. It's about understanding that people are multifaceted and capable of both positive and negative qualities. Frank Bruni calls for humility, describing it as the antidote to grievance. He writes that humility acknowledges that life is a mix of blessings and disappointments and that individual fortune must always be balanced against the common good. And Kate Cohen, in a recent Washington Post piece, reminds us of the power of shared realities. She likens cooking, just peeling potatoes and roasting vegetables, as a way to grasp and share simple reality. These mundane physical acts ground us in truth in a collective experience that transcends our divides. With that said, we must replace the rhetoric and grievance with one of curiosity and connection and ask ourselves, what if I listened instead of lectured? What if I tried to understand someone's motivations instead of dismissing them outright? And what if I embraced the possibility that I could be wrong? These questions aren't easy to answer, but they're essential. One grievance that afflicts our country is with immigrants and people who are, quote, taking our jobs. President-elect Trump proposes a 25% tariff on Mexican imports unless Mexico does something radical about immigration and also taking our jobs. On the surface, it sounds like a bold policy, but dig deeper and you realize that 69% of our fruits and vegetables come from Mexico. Pair that with Trump's promise to deport undocumented immigrants who harvest much of our remaining produce, and you're looking at skyrocketing food prices. Talk about inflation. And understanding these complexities is critical. Without it, we risk becoming like the January 6th rioters, so blinded by certainty that we fail to see the consequences of our actions or our thoughts. And what is the price if we don't step back? What happens? If we lose that, we lose our ability to engage meaningfully with those who see the world differently, which is basically everybody. We become prisoners of our own biases, trapped in a cycle of blame and division, and ultimately, we weaken the very democracy we claim to cherish. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can choose to be better than the discourse that tempts us to hate, to vilify, to divide, and we can choose humility, curiosity, and connection. So I leave you with this challenge. Can we rise above the noise and act as the best version of ourselves? Can we step back and take a breath and find common ground in a world that so desperately needs it? And the answer lies with each of us individually. Let's start today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and look over here for other videos, and I will see you in the next video.